welcome to another episode of SyncRiffs. My name's Charles from Blue Buddha Entertainment here in Los Angeles, and today we have a special guest in the studio, music supervisor Susan Dolan from Dig Music. Good morning, Susan. How's it going?
Hey, Charles. Good morning.
Good morning, and so good to reconnect and catch up. And
Yes.
yeah,
Really good. We go way back.
definitely. And to thread the needle on some of your amazing work. We worked on Men and Trees back in the day, and then I know the ad space. You've done a lot of work working on ads, everything from Mitsubishi, Nike, Hyundai to M&M, the M&M product, not M&M the rapper, Princess Cruises, to name a few. And yeah, would love to unpack and hear how you first broke into the industry, and then I know over
Sure.
the years you transitioned into working in the ad space.
Yeah. Well, I was always working in the ad space. I actually have a former life working for ad agencies in a very non-creative role, and then decided that that just was not the path I wanted to take with my career. And then in my late 20s, I decided to pivot into music. And, actually, I mean, I wanted to become a creative in some sense. So I started taking art classes thinking, oh, maybe I'll be an art director in an ad agency. But where my heart really wanted to go was music. But I had zero connections. So I just decided to take the two parallel paths, and then whichever one took hold the most organically and the fastest was the one I was going to take.
Yeah.
And that ended up being music. So I was living in New York working for a big ad agency, and it was a very demanding job, and I was pretty miserable. But living in the East Village, and started going to shows more as a form of escape because I didn't like my job that much. So, but never felt super cool. Never felt cool enough to work in the music industry. I mean, that's how I viewed things at that point. But then I moved out to LA and landed in Santa Monica, which, my apartment was blocks away from KCRW, which, but for those of you who don't know, it's kind of an institution in LA. And it's a membership supported radio station that has become famous for breaking new artists and an eclectic mix of programming. So it was a great way to get my foot in the door. Yeah. And through that experience, I met, all the DJs who had like side gigs as music supervisors working on soundtracks to movies and TV shows. And I thought that was so cool. But with my background in advertising, I figured out there was a way to maybe pivot my career into doing music for commercials. And that's where I landed at a company called Hum, which was focused on original score for TV commercials. So they were actually known for working with composers to write tracks for commercials. But anytime a client needed licensing help or help finding a song that would work for a commercial in lieu of doing something original, that's where I got called in.
Very
cool. And I worked under Trisha Halloran, who who now has a huge TV, a huge career as a music supervisor for TV shows. But back then we were kind of side by side in our office, pitching songs for commercials. So that's kind of how it all started.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so correct. And when you were at Hum, so Men and Trees was just one of the TV shows.
Yes. So alongside doing commercials, Trisha was, kind of shimmying her way into TV a little more, and Men and Trees was her first show, and I got to work on it with her, which was very exciting. And that's really how I met you.
Yeah.
Because you had, you were one of the OG sync licensing reps. And you had your catalog of indie artists, which is
Mhm.
what we needed for this show primarily.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how we connected. And
Yeah.
then I remember one of my huge like mess ups, one of my first like learning growth experiences was with one of your bands. I don't know if you remember this, but you had a band that I had placed in the episode that was going to mix.
Uh-huh.
And we had grown so comfortable working with each other. And I thought that everything was going to be cool.
Yeah.
But then the day before the mix, I cleared the track with you finally.
Right.
And you're like, I don't have that artist anymore. They
Oh,
actually
right.
signed with Warner Chapel.
Yeah. Oh,
And
it's come.
I went, oh no. So that was a huge lesson for me. One I never ever forgot that as a
Mhm.
music supervisor, you cannot assume anything. You can
Mhm.
never assume that it's just going to
Right.
be an easy clear because things are constantly changing. But also a testament to you that you work with artists that go on to bigger
Bigger,
deals.
bigger and better. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
No. Yeah. It's, and then also that, and then we've kind of echoed that in past podcasts. It's like drop of a hat, artists can get signed, label, pub
right.
deal, and it's warp speed. And that's a testament
Yes.
to what you guys do. It's ever changing, and it's just keeping in the loop of what's happening. And so yeah, so from that, um, you were at Hum, and then did you slowly over time, and then you went to form Dig Music.
Right. Well, I stayed at home for a long time,
Mhm.
working on ads. Always had dreams of maybe having my own company someday. But it took me several years to kind of get to that point.
Yeah,
Eventually, Hum closed, and that was my moment.
right. The fork in the road. Do I
Yes.
move on? Do I and it's been the right choice because you've been killing
Yeah.
it on some
Oh,
amazing
thanks.
ads. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 No,
yeah,
sometimes like the universe kind of gives you that nudge.
100%. Whether it's carpe diem, jump off the cliff, and
Yeah. Yeah. So it's worked out pretty well.
Mhm.
I still work with my former colleagues from Hum who
Mhm.
now started a new company, and we've been able to continue working together. But I'm also free to kind of take on my own projects, which has been really awesome.
So, is there any one thing, so to thread the needle, Susan, when you were in the ad world, what helped prepare you to be a music supervisor as far as the workflow? I mean, before I know you were in ads, but it wasn't in the music super
Sure.
capacity. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for asking that question. Having a former life is something that I am sometimes nervous to bring up, but it really was an incredible foundation for me. Um, I worked for a big New York ad agency and had a knack for getting myself on the most demanding accounts.
Uh-huh.
So my threshold for pain is pretty high. It was long hours and
Mm.
very fast paced.
Mhm.
And that really set me up for this job because it can be pretty high pressure sometimes and
Mm.
fast paced.
Mhm. Mhm.
I also learned a lot about working with creative teams and managing that creative process. Um, a lot of the job is, you know, extrapolating from feedback, from notes, and kind of translating it into what it might mean in
Mhm.
musical terms.
Mm.
A lot of creative teams at ad agencies just simply do not have the vernacular.
Right.
I mean, who would, right? I mean,
Yeah.
um, if maybe they mean something but just don't know how to say it in musical
Mhm.
terms. So
Mhm.
I think I got kind of good at that in that former life. It's just kind of maybe not. I wasn't in music at that point, but
Mm.
it's you know taking information, processing it,
Mhm.
and then translating it for others, um, and adding value to it along the way. That's key.
Value and clarity and timeliness,
Clarity.
right?
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. And learning
mm,
how to streamline processes
mhm,
because, sometimes, you know, it, a song you pitch, if you pitch it and then
mhm,
later find out that you can't clear it,
mm.
that does not bode well for you.
Yeah. Yes.
um, so I think doing a little extra legwork on things to make sure, learning from that Men and Trees experience with you, doing a
Sure.
little extra legwork on something up front to make sure that you at least know who the entities are, who the
Mhm,
rights holders are, and
mhm,
make sure it's going to be clearable and at the budget that you have
mhm.
can go a really make the process a lot more smoother for your client, make their experience good.
Yeah, so I think, Susan, because sort of the big question for me, because my bread and butter, whether it's TV or film, occasional trailers will pitch to. But if you
Mhm.
could touch on, let's say there's a Nike ad spot that's going to come out in the fall for the new LeBron James shoe. So what's your lead times look and the workflow? What's, when is,
Sure.
yeah, that process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's different for every project.
Sure.
Advertising is notoriously fast paced,
Mhm.
and it really depends on when the agency decides to rope you into the process. Ideally, you're roped in as early as possible because you want to help
Mhm.
pave the way to them finding a great song that they can have and that you can, help navigate the train of the industry to kind of sidestep any possible roadblocks.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the sooner you get involved, the better. But I don't know. I mean, I work with a client right now that um, we just finished their Thanksgiving ad, and now we're working on their holiday ad, and it's July.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, those instances, I think it's so good to get in early because
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
a finite number of holiday songs out there that are well known, and the
Mhm.
sooner you can kind of uh, strike and pull the trigger on something, like you can
Yeah.
kind of have that exclusivity
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
as part of your deal. But I've also worked on projects where it is a total 911 emergency. They are mixing
Oh my goodness.
24 hours from now. They have to ship it 3 days from now.
Oh wow.
And so you're like, okay, well, roll your sleeves up and just do the
Yeah.
best you can
Right.
and try to get them something that is going to be easy to clear and
Mhm.
great. So
Time, yeah, the time to bootstrap. It's fire 911, and hopefully, Susan. So, a question I have is, let's, for argument's sake, if it's a Hallmark or it's a Christmas spot, it's a Christmas something
mhm.
that's going to go right at Christmas time. Do you advise the client as to direction, i.e., is it a public domain Christmas track? Is it an original Christmas song? Do you decide that and you advise them based on their budget and the product and the brand? How does that work creatively? Or they come in having their ideas?
Sure. I think part of your job as a music supervisor is to help your clients every step of the way. They may come with very strong opinions on something, and sometimes, great, it works. And then other times, you may have to give them some information about what they're intending to do and, maybe offer up some different suggestions.
Mhm.
So if they have a very small budget, I mean, going the public domain path is a really great way to go.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes they don't realize that some big Christmas songs out there are not public domain. So you have to it's your job to kind of let them know that.
Mhm.
Um, I think it just really depends. Sometimes
Sure.
they have a strong opinion about getting a recognizable holiday song, and then
Mhm.
you really have to be like, some Christmas songs can be expensive. I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to work with your budget. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
maybe consider some original Christmas songs that will be
Mhm.
also great.
Mhm.
Um, So it's a process and it's a journey
Yeah.
that you have to go on. And every every project's a little bit different.
100%. And that, I'm sure, correct, that's the benefit, obviously, if those relationships you have with a certain client, and if you continue to work with them over the years, then you
Hmm.
kind of know their process, they know your
Yeah,
process.
exactly.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's lucky to find those clients that you get to work with regularly.
Yeah,
But in advertising, sometimes you're working with brand new teams every single day.
every single
so,
right. Yeah.
you have to quickly assess what their process is like and how you add value.
100%. And then, some things, since you have expertise in it, Susan, if we could spend a moment, and so working on um, television car commercials.
Car commercials. Okay.
So with Mitsubishi, back when I was at EMI Records in the 90s, Death in Vegas,
Oh
Days Go
yeah.
By. Yes. So let's talk about trends in music. So
Okay,
electronic
that was
trap.
a big one. That was a big
Yeah. Oh
one.
my God.
Yeah.
And then, so let's talk about that. What's, you've worked on Hyundai, Mitsubishi,
Hmm.
sort of what sets the tone for what kind of music, car manufacturers are going to use.
Oh, well, cars specifically?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know. It does seem like cars in particular really latch on to these trends. Gosh, I think that that Mitsubishi ad came out even before I worked in music. But I remember it,
Yeah.
as a consumer. I remember seeing that and being like, "Oh, that's cool."
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, that's really exciting that brands are now creating these soundtracks that really resonate. Because before it was just jingles and movies were the ones that really had like these soundtracks. But I think that was the turning point, or somewhere in there, like in the early 2000s, like Gap started coming out with ads with Daft Punk and everything. And it
Yeah.
was like things were starting to change. Apple started licensing, and now like licensing was hot.
Hmm.
And, maybe it became a little more acceptable. Bands weren't there wasn't like this stigma attached to it anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Things were changing in the music industry where, Napster came out, bands were not selling records to the
Hmm.
same degree. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
like iTunes is introduced. So what happens is that bands have to find other sources of income,
Yep.
and licensing became that one of them, along
Hmm.
with touring and everything.
Hmm.
So when I entered this business, it was probably about 2006,
Hmm.
and Juno, the film, came out.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know if you remember Juno, but it had the moldy peaches and it had the
Yeah.
soundtrack that was just like so stripped back and so lo-fi, but
Lo-fi.
like really charming and
Yeah.
kind of like just elementary kind of chords, and it's
Hmm.
just so sweet. And I don't know if it was like something that was happening in a culture already, or if Juno just like totally
Yeah.
created this culture. But sure enough, like 6 months to a year of that, like all the brands started to kind of follow that trend. And I remember like working on ads, and it just seemed like one after another,
Hmm.
like they all needed this kind of like approachable, charming kind of sound.
Hmm.
So that was a distinct trend happening. I mean, I don't know if you remember like New Soul by Yael Naim and like the Apple commercial. I mean, even Tech,
Yeah. Right.
which you would normally think like a modern song, like modern sounding, it just, even they were kind of going in that path. But
Mhm.
then sure enough, like whenever there's something that takes hold in the mainstream, like there's always going to
Mhm.
be something that comes along to counter that. And
Yeah.
shortly after um, 1901, or like that Phoenix album came out,
Yeah.
and Cadillac
Mhm.
licensed that song, and it was modern, and it was like these programmed drums, and it was just like
Mhm, mhm,
super slick but indie at the same time, and then that kind of like took hold too.
mhm, mhm.
um I mean, I could go on and on. Like it just there's just a cycle that happens.
Yeah.
Like we're
Yeah.
here and then we're here. And
Right.
I would say, a lot of times, like something that happens culturally, like a cultural event, whether it be like a movie or um, something like, um, with Lizzo recent, like
Mhm,
I feel like one of the most recent trends is like this Lizzo kind of vibe where it's like empowering and
mhm,
love the body you're in.
mhm, mhm,
That is a very much a trend that's happening right now.
mhm,
And, that's something that music drove. The films sometimes drive this, like Stranger Things,
mhm, mhm.
or, I that Whiplash Birdman thing that
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
the jazz drums, like that was like
Mhm.
very
Right.
popular and score. Uh, it's rare that a brand itself would drive a
Mhm.
trend like that.
Mm.
Um, but it can happen,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think Apple has, their creme de la creme in terms of licensing. So a lot
Mhm.
of brands are trying to follow that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I don't see it as much happening nowadays, though. I mean, there were these really big, distinct trends
Mm.
in like the 2000s, 2010s, and then there are still trends. Like Lizzo wasn't too long ago, but
Mhm.
it doesn't really seem like those trends are as massive anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder if that's just because um, our culture is so fragmented right now, just because of like the way we consume
Yeah.
content.
Right.
Like, it's very rare that we have like big things that kind of sweep the nation.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Sure. Because a couple points just to bookend what you said, Susan.
Mhm.
Because when in 2012 I was at Hitcher Pulse, and one of the clients was Astroworks, so they
Mhm.
had um, it was we're pitching to Coke, the Coke, and they were looking at Alive by, and of course the name of the band's escaping me. They sound like MGMT, and we were talking about them the other day, but their
Yeah.
costumes, it's like they dress up in Aztec.
Oh, oh, is it People Mover or what was it? Or
Oh, I'm gonna have to
mm.
Empire of the Sun.
Oh, Empire of the Sun.
Yes, so
Yes.
we talked about that when we met the other day. But
Oh
so
yeah, yeah.
a key point, Susan, is alignment of the brand and your consumer. So phonically, the song fit the ad, Coke commercial,
Mhm.
you make me feel alive, you make me feel alive.
Yeah.
But Coke felt that the end consumer, the branding of the imagery of the band was too out there. So that alignment, I'm sure you deal with making sure, correct. A lot of times, if you use a certain song from a frontline band, the
Yeah.
consumers and the product alignment have to be
Oh,
together.
that's interesting. And they weren't going to even be featured in the commercial. It was just their song.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when a brand is going to license a piece of music for a commercial, um, it's more than just finding music for
Mhm.
the commercial. They're licensing your artistry
Mhm.
and, the blood, sweat, tears you put into touring and gaining your own, fan base.
Mhm. Mhm.
There are a lot of things at play when a brand is looking to license a song,
Mm.
because they're also considering, the what you represent
Mhm.
and stand for. And they consider, you know, again, like the fan base that you've built.
Mhm.
Metrics do kind of matter. I think they want to see like maybe that you have some listens on Spotify,
Yeah.
proving that people like what they hear,
Mhm, mhm.
but maybe, not so many listens that like they're still kind of getting you while you're under the radar.
Mhm, mhm.
And yeah, I think especially with bands that have, achieved some level of recognizability just for, you know, their artistic vision
Yeah.
and how they portray themselves on stage. A brand will have to consider, whether or not that fits their particular ethos.
Yes.
But I'm surprised that they thought that that was too out there. Like, I
Yeah.
don't
So
know.
we're
I mean,
Mhm.
I think that just is super fun what they do. And
Yeah.
I think Coca-Cola is about fun, but I don't work at the brand, so I don't know what they were
Sure.
thinking.
100%. And correct, I think, the examples of Mitsubishi and,
Hmm.
now with TikTok,
Oh,
that
yeah.
can drive the narrative of, an ad exec could be like, "Oh, let's who's this artist out of nowhere? Let's use their track."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of, again, what I was saying earlier about
Mhm.
how we are consuming content so differently now than
Mm,
we were
mhm,
even 5 years ago.
mhm,
Um, I'm not going to pretend that I'm some expert here. I am not. I have no idea what is
mhm.
happening. It is so crazy.
Sure. Yeah.
but but yes, I mean that I think what it all comes down to is people do not have to look for to brands to tell them, about some band that they should be listening to. I mean, I
Mhm,
think
mhm, mhm,
those that like Phoenix placement, for instance, that we just talked about,
mhm,
that was a brand saying, this song is cool. We put it on our spot. It it resonates with people. And then next thing you know, this band is like at a new stratosphere in their
mhm.
career and they're selling out Hollywood Bowl and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't think brands can single-handedly be responsible for breaking a band like they used to.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I would agree because also, I think the challenges now, as we know, post pandemic with streaming, there's just too much content out there in any
There's
given.
just too much. But it's also like people, we have Spotify now, so we have access to anything and everything, and
Mhm,
it's people are creating their own playlists, which could be like anything from like hardcore EDM to like Fleetwood
mhm,
Mac, and it's
mhm.
totally okay. And that's you. And
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, I'm Susan and I only listen to this genre.
Right.
Or you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
it's we're all prisms.
Yeah.
But, but yeah, TikTok is like really demonstrating that though. And the the songs that become hits on
Mhm,
TikTok, it's
mhm.
so random now.
So random. And as you were talking about earlier about the Juno soundtrack, what came to my mind as well was, when Carey Brothers on the Garden State soundtrack, that Hotel
Oh,
Cafe.
Garden State, yes.
Yes. You
Yeah,
know,
that was huge too.
another huge right. And then, whether it's Swedish bands or Royksop, a
Mhm.
certain sound that defines. And then it's interesting because I know same with, in 2012, Bastille, Bad Blood. Now it's like 10 years of the Bastille, and Dan
Mm.
Auerbach and Bastille is on tour now. And it's just time flies by. But I think at the heart of it, Susan, what really our drive and passion is,
Mhm.
the authenticity in indie bands that we work with. It's all about the
Absolutely.
song.
Yes. Yeah, because at the end of the day,
Mhm.
the brand is trying to connect with you authentically. I
Mhm.
mean, anyone any ad agency can go out and create a song. They're like, I need this and this and this in the song. I need it to be about sunshine, and I need hand claps, and I need this. Go out and make it, you know? But when a brand is really interested in licensing a song
Mhm.
by an artist, and I mean, like, you know, if they're going to do it right, they're going for that like unmanufactured kind of artist, who is like out there trying to build their own fan base. They're like they have a unique point of view.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, these are all things that brands, they like, that's what they're licensing in addition to your song too.
Yeah.
Like, they want to leverage what you are bringing to the table
Mhm.
so that they can connect and resonate with their audience more authentically.
Huge point, and you set up brilliantly. That's the notion. Same with artificial intelligence and music. I mean,
I know. I
right?
know. I mean, and when you say that, like, you mean when we are hearing stories about like taking the weekend's voice or something and like creating a track with it, or like having it write a song,
I,
period.
having it write a song, and what was interesting to me, Susan, is hearing a song that was an AI vocal and
Yeah.
really hard to discern. Like, and then if you tell someone, it's like Coke Pepsi challenge. You're like, oh, that's a great singer. Who is that? And then I lie
Yeah.
to you. And they're like, it was actually AI. I mean, it's so
I don't
it's
know what's going to
shocking.
happen. I know. I mean, I think it's possible that there will be brands out there who need that thing, that specific thing. And, maybe they'll go out and just have AI create something and that'll be okay with them. But
Mm,
I don't know. I also feel like brands might lose out on that authenticity that resonates with people. I mean, it
mhm.
really depends on how people are going to take this.
True. Yes, yes, yes. Because at the end of the day, and then also there's sort of consumers vote with their dollars. So if bands,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we just talked about trends this whole half hour.
Mhm.
Whenever there's going to be a trend, there's going to be like a counter movement, right? I mean, with technology on the rise, we saw this other culture of like slow food and farm to table and this and that. So if AI really takes hold, like, for sure, there's going to be something else that crops up to counter
Yes, it's the proverbial the chess snap.
that. You heard it here first. That's my theory. I think that's going to happen.
Yes, yes. No, and it's cool because it's going to actually air this week. But I had a good friend of mine, Troy McCubbin. He works for Allo Tracks. He's a trailer house, and he had remixed and worked with Steve Perry on the Journey track for Stranger Things. And we were talking about trailerization
Yeah, yeah.
and that trend. And then, I asked him, what's the trend with trailers? He's like, well, and so he was saying no more remixes, but
Uh,
when, like you
yeah,
said, things, if things, if it becomes, after a while, it becomes the same, then you need to vary it.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I was saying earlier how I felt that brands maybe can't like single-handedly break a band anymore.
Mm,
Um, I definitely feel like if there is anything happening out there right now, it is like this return to recognizability.
yeah.
and and as you know, there are a finite number of well-known songs out there, and on top of that, finite number of well-known songs that are suitable for commercials. So we
Mm,
basically have to like go back to the well a million times and
right.
end up licensing a lot of these same songs. So
Mm,
the question is like, well, can we put an unexpected twist on something, make it fresh again. And
Yeah.
that's been always a very, you know, common path to take with commercials.
Sure, sure. So just to bookend it, and then,
Yeah.
safe to say, it's your job of, so say if the brand is Harley Davidson, and they're like, we want George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone because that song and Harley. So then you're like, well, hey, everyone knows that track, but let's try something else.
Yeah, yeah. Like an unknown version, like um a song that maybe achieves the same kind of spirit and has the same vibe, but lesser known. Well, yeah, I mean, I want to say that song "Bad to the Bone" is actually quite expensive.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into it recently,
Mhm.
but I think it
Mhm.
is like in terms of like expensive songs, like it's like really expensive.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it might be your only option is to find something that embodies that kind of rebellious spirit,
Mhm.
but a
Mhm.
lesser known song. But I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of brands are trying to break through to you, the consumer, and a
Mhm.
lot of them feel like the equity of a well-known song is gonna like help their message come across and get your
Yeah.
attention more.
Yes. Yes. A lot of so then correct, Susan, and just to book in that on the surface, someone could say, oh, let's save some money and we'll do a cover version of Bad to the Bone.
Yeah,
But once you pull the layers back, you'll be like, okay, so for argument's sake, Thorogood at the time, there was 5 writers on the track. You
yeah,
do the research and you're like, 3 of the writers are still alive. 2 of them passed away. So now I
hmm,
need to research the estates. What
yeah.
happened to that share? And
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah. There's when you license just the publishing,
Mhm.
yeah, there could be lots of parties involved and could be also really expensive. And some of them may feel, I don't know about Bad to the Bone specifically, but
Mhm.
they may have certain restrictions around how the song is created. They may not want the song to be covered
Mhm. Mhm.
in connection with the brand. So
Mhm.
you might be out of luck.
Yeah, and correct. It's not uncommon. Sometimes artists, before they pass away in their
Mm,
estate planning, they could say, after I pass, I don't want my works used in sync because it goes against my beliefs.
absolutely. Yeah,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
know. Beastie Boys, Tom Petty, I think fall into that category.
Yeah, yeah, and so no, it's and I bring that up because I think it's and maybe we'll have you back in another episode
Part
sometime. But
two.
part 2 covers because everyone could say, "Hey, let's cover this, cover that," but there's a lot of homework, knowing who the publishers are and having relationships with them or administrators to say, "Hey, if we cover this, will it work as far as
Yeah,
clearance?"
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think with covers, um, it has to be more than just saving money. I think you really have to bring something else to the table because,
Yeah,
there's always that cover song out there that like no one asked for. It's like very hard to make a song better than the original. So doing a sound alike is not usually the way to go.
yeah,
But if you can do something special with it,
hmm
that that could be really cool. Or maybe something that is normally like if it's from the 80s or something and it has kind of like a dated sound, like a dated production,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
then dusting it off and giving it a modern feel
Mhm.
is like something that we do a lot.
Now, correct. So Weird Al Yankovic in parodies. That would fall under fair use,
Oh gosh, I would not count on that. I don't
right?
know. I don't know.
Yeah. No.
I mean, all of that stuff requires investigation. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much gray area, and I
Yeah.
think as a brand, you really more times than not, a brand's not gonna wanna risk anything like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll bookend it, or we'll close it out with this final question, because I think it was like an ad spot had done something that sounded like tag teams. Whoop, there it is. But it was, for like, you know, clothing detergent, and
Okay.
yeah. So then like you said, you got to research it. Then the legal team, what are the parameters? And
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And, whenever we create something new that's maybe inspired by something else, we
Mhm.
always enroll a musicologist. Because 'cause I'm not a musicologist. I am not a musician, and I would not really be able to say for sure, like, "Oh, this does or doesn't infringe on this copyright."
Yeah.
I'm not like, that's not what I'm here to do, and I'm not
Mhm.
qualified to make that
Mhm.
call. So I
Yeah.
think it's really critical to make sure that a musicologist is involved who can really say definitively that,
Right.
like, you're good.
And that's who they'll bring in in court cases with copyright
Oh,
infringement,
yeah.
to testify, the musicologist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I know.
It's so a cool question we always like to ask to our guest, and time flies by, but what's on repeat right now on your Spotify playlist?
Oh, God. Well, I have a 4-year-old son, so the only thing on repeat around here is, like, the Darth Vader song, John Williams from Star Wars.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, being able to indulge in an album is just like, unfortunately, like not anything I have the ability to do right now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm always looking out for cool tracks.
Yeah.
I try to keep my Spotify list somewhat current. It's on my website. Anything that catches my ear, I'll just throw up on there. But
Mhm.
I think it's probably a little bit outdated now. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I will revisit things like that I remember from a long time ago and be like, oh, yeah, this was good, and just kind of do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, always listening to new songs. I just unfortunately don't get a chance to like have them on repeat.
100%. So then I'll tweak the question a little bit, because since
Oh, okay.
I'm a radio DJ guy,
Uh-huh.
when I hear new music, occupational hazard, I'm always just the hook,
Oh, yeah.
vocal hook, melodic hook, or is it an instrumentation hook? So
Yeah.
with your approach, you're for listening in the first 5-10 seconds. So what determines, what's your first listen that you're, you know,
Oh, yeah. That's like an easier question. I know. I am like thinking about like I am the queen of Shazam. I will Shazam in the grocery store. I'll be anywhere and I'm Shazamming stuff because I'm like, oh, I hear something
yeah.
that sounds like it has potential. I'm usually looking for something like you just said, like a hook or something catchy or something distinctive
Mhm.
that like can kind of go somewhere quickly and like resolve itself like within 30 seconds.
You're right.
And that has, kind of like a positive spirit, in it, but it's like not cheesy or run of the mill kind of sounding. But there's
Yeah.
like something distinctive about it that
Mhm.
like just sounds different and fresh.
Different and fresh. So yeah, so two things come to my mind, Fast Car by Tracy Chapman,
Yeah.
you know, and then it's interesting because it's Love or Hate, but You're Beautiful by James Blunt. That came, and there's certain things, that emotion, or, what moves us in giving again in any moment, that the first time you hear a song that becomes a hit, or Harry Styles, the
Uh-huh.
nostalgia of
Oh
certain.
yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating because there is a formula for a reason, of certain chords and certain
Uh-huh.
notes that tug at our heartstring, and the emotion, and or the gruffness of, I think
Yeah.
it's going to be 30 years of Portishead's Dummy record. And
oh, wow.
yeah, nobody loves Sour Times, Beth Gibbons with, the
Mhm.
rawness and the trip hop vibe of what Adrian Utley did on that record.
Yeah. Oh my God. I know you're making me think of, the latest Beyonce album. Like, I know what I'm going to say is maybe sacrilegious. Like, I've never been like, I don't like have her albums on repeat or anything. I mean, but like that last one, I was just like my brain, like it just, like my head exploded. I thought it was a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I wish I could spend more time listening to that.
I know. So maybe that's on the bucket list when you're
Yeah.
driving to pick up your son from preschool. You're like, put this on play.
Totally. I am going to.
Yeah. It's too cool. Thank you, Susan. It was great chatting with you today. The time flies by, but I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by.
Hey, thanks, Charles. It's always great chatting with you.
Always great chatting and connecting.
Yeah.
So hang tight for 2 secs.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to SyncRiffs. Subscribe, like, hit that notification bell. Thank you, Susan Dolan, so much for stopping by, and we'll catch everybody and see you on the other side. Namaste.